So, I crashed the drone, or rather it kind of crashed on its own. Now this happened earlier in the year, so I've had some time to heal emotionally and repair the drone. And I want to take you guys through that experience, how the repair worked, but most importantly, maybe some lessons learned along the way. Let's start with a little bit of background. If you're new to this channel, first of all, welcome. But secondly, we're a small channel that we focus on adventure riding and stuff like that. But honestly, we've been riding for a long time. More importantly, I've been passionate about video and photography and music as well for many, many years. But I digress. I remember when the first DJI drones came out way back in the day, the ones where you had to mount a GoPro on them. And you know, it was the coolest thing ever. Fast forward to today, many drones have the capability of tracking now, including the Skydio, which I would argue sort of pioneered the idea of self-tracking obstacle avoidance all in one bundle. They didn't really invent a new drone. They just, in my opinion, reinvented the way we can use them going forward. And we know DJI and everybody else has jumped on board. And like I said, I don't know who was first to do this, but if you ask anybody, and if you do some research, Skydio is known for one primary thing, and that is the self-tracking and obstacle avoidance capabilities. This is the exact reason why we chose to go with the Skydio, specifically the Skydio 2. Prior to actually buying it, I spent many months sort of window shopping the Skydio. I was always fascinated by its autonomy and obstacle avoidance capabilities. Even Skydio had ads where I think the drone, if I remember correctly, followed the cyclists through the woods and various other environments. You might know where this is going. You see, like most folks, when we first started using the Skydio, we were very cautious. I mean, we were afraid to get close to any obstacles on purpose. But then over time, that trust was earned and we realized that it's actually really good and you can't really crash it. Until I think we got a little too comfortable with that. So we had the drone follow us through a pretty tight wooded area. It was a trail, like a single track trail. And to the human eye, it seemed like a good idea because when you stand in the trail, visually you can see the tunnel in the trail, a path for you to ride through, for the drone to fly through. But we forgot one thing. The way the drone actually tracks the subject is not like we think it does. It's basically got a subject, which is its objective, and it's trying to follow it and avoid any obstacle in the way. It's not thinking ahead that, hey, the trail weaves in and out like this. No, it's trying to get to the subject as fast as possible. So without further ado, let me show you the footage of what happened. So it actually took us a long time to find the drone, primarily because we didn't hear the humming sound. Typically, if you lose sight of it, you can hear it in the woods somewhere stuck in a tree or between trees. In this case, we luckily came across it. Michael found it by a tree stump. And it was immediately apparent that it was in really bad shape. The gimbal was completely broken off. It was immediately devastating. Here's what I think happened. It fell behind as I rode down the hill and tried to speed up in order to catch up with me. And here is a brief but important detail. A bare twig. No leaves, just a dry twig, branch, whatever. As far as I can tell, this is exactly what the drone collided with before it spun out of control. However, to make matters worse, it looks like the drone fell directly into the puddle and continued to spin at full throttle and hopped out of the puddle and landed next to a tree trunk where we subsequently found it. I can't even explain how frustrated or upset I was. On the one hand, I kind of knew it wasn't a good idea to fly there, but at the same time, it had done so well throughout that entire trail, so it was so confusing how it got wiped out by a small twig. Regardless, I had no other choice but to pursue repairs, and let me explain how that process worked. I began the process by submitting a ticket on the Skydio website. A case number was assigned and a rep reached out to me via email. When you submit a repair ticket or an issue ticket, they will start by asking for the latest flight log from the drone. This is something you have to do through the Skydio app on your phone. And surprisingly, it worked even though my drone couldn't fully start up and calibrate. After that, they requested a list of information such as the smartphone that I used, the version of the app, the method of flight that was used, for instance, beacon, remote, or whatever. They also eventually asked for some images to help detail the damage. So after giving him all that info, they immediately reached back and told me, hey, you're out of warranty. Which I know because I actually bought this drone used from original owner who had used it for like construction engineering inspections. And so at this point, they offered to evaluate the drone, and there's a non-refundable fee of $150 to do that. Basically, what happens is you pay that fee, they send you a free shipping label, you package your drone, you take everything off, all the accessories and stuff like the batteries, props, and you send it in. Now, before we got any further, they warned me. They warned me saying that the repair cost range is from $200 to $800. Actually $850. And there's no way they can tell you exactly what that's going to be until they get the drone in their hands. They also told me something interesting, that they don't actually repair your specific drone. For instance, what happens is you send them your broken drone, they take it apart, they do the assessment. But what you get back is a refurbished drone that probably got repaired on a previous cycle. And I would imagine that if my drone was repairable, it probably did eventually get repaired and got sent to a customer that had a replacement done in the future. This is obviously done to expedite the repair process and the return process to the customers. That way you don't have to wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks for your drone to get fixed and sent back to you. After I sent the drone in, they told me that it could take up to 2 weeks to evaluate the damage. In addition to that, they said it could take up to, I think, 15 days to repair the drone and get it back to you, which is kind of weird because of the whole refurb process. However, it actually happened very fast. As soon as they received my broken drone, the next day they reached out with a verdict. And here's what they said. They said, obviously, the gimbal needed to be replaced, which, okay, I wasn't surprised by that. But the weird thing is that they also said that the logic board needed to be replaced as well, which is more or less maybe the motherboard inside. And as far as I understand, that happens because if and when the logic board gets in contact with water and gets damaged, which kind of makes sense, I guess, because I think from the footage, from the crash footage, it did hop into a puddle briefly. Somehow the water must have reached the logic board. The charge was $400. Now that's actually in addition to the non-refundable $150 in the beginning. So in a total, it was $550 to repair the drone, plus actually tax as well. So it was more than that. Yeah, so I actually still had the option to decline the repair, but then I'd be forced to lose $150, and they would have returned my drone to me completely taken apart, and I think they do that on purpose because, I mean, well, they evaluate the damage too, but they don't put it back together for you. In other words, it was pretty hard to refuse their offer. If the repair costs would have exceeded that and went all the way up to $850, I would have been inclined to just go on like Facebook Marketplace and find a used drone for sale. Not the whole kit, not the expensive deal, but just a used one. Maybe somebody's selling the beginner kit. And that's because I already have a ton of batteries. I already have the remote. I've got the beacon. I've got the cables, everything but the drone. But because it was kind of in that price range, and I also couldn't really buy a new one because they're all back ordered, at least at the time of searching. Anyway, once I paid the repair fee, which by the way comes to you in kind of a funky email, it almost feels like a scam. It's like, click this link to pay your fee, and it's like, okay. But they did warn me that, hey, you're gonna get a separate email with the payment. You put your credit card in there and they can proceed with the repairs. After the payment, it only took, I think, several days for them to send me a follow-up email with a tracking number, not just an email, but a tracking number of the replacement drone. So all in all, the process was very fast. Despite the repair costs, it was a lot faster than the expectations they had given me. So at this point, if the lesson isn't obvious here to you, here's kind of a summary of what I think we learned here. Going forward, I don't think we're ever going to let the drone follow us via the beacon through wooded areas, especially when there is not full foliage on the leaves. I mean, in hindsight, I could have probably hopped off my bike, or Michael could have, and manually have operated that drone behind one of us, following us through the trail. Because we can actually control it better because we anticipate the trail opening. But honestly, I don't think we're going to be doing that again. If we ever use, which we have since then, use the beacon, we're going to do it in wide open spaces and just not through areas that have limbs sticking out, because when the drone is going fast, it can't dodge everything. But to be completely honest, the other point is I am slightly frustrated because, as I mentioned in the beginning, this was a purchase we made with a specific idea of that autonomy, that self-flying mode. And it just was kind of frustrating that the drone didn't live up to what we had imagined its standards were. And I know you could argue that all day, but you know, DJI makes a lot of great products that probably I would argue have superior video quality to the Skydio drone. And yet we got the Skydio drone because of its superior obstacle avoidance. So it's a kind of a big mess. You know, you're not really sure which way to go. I probably would argue that it's debatable, but if we had had a DJI product following us in that same exact location, it probably would have, I mean, maybe it wouldn't have crashed, but it would have definitely lost us as a subject tracking operation probably more than once. And like I said, I probably won't have the drone track us through heavily wooded areas again, no matter how deceiving Skydio's ads are about how capable it is. You really do have to be careful. Anyway, I hope that this video helps you guys understand sort of the capabilities of the drone and also what the repair process looks like, because it was completely new to me and is probably going to be new to you if you have to go through it. It's not, you know, written out detail by detail. Ooh, one more piece of advice. Don't forget to check for updates on your drone. I say that not because your firmware is bad or doesn't work, but because if you do have an unfortunate incident where you crash the drone, Skydio will actually ask you the firmware version on your drone. And I think they do that because if there's a patch update that was available and you ignored it, they might use that against you. So it's a good idea to make sure this thing here is up to date. And yes, it's not easy. You have to download the update on your phone, then connect to your drone and all that. But if you can plan ahead whenever you know you're going to use it, just check the firmware. If there's an update it before you fly. Well, that's all for this video, guys. We'll see you on the next one.